everyone, and this is Laura with Stuff I Find Interesting. This is episode 16, if you can believe it. My name is Laura, and I talk about stuff I find interesting. That's pretty much it. We are going to start with the bell because I forgot to share the link of what the bell from Russia sounded like. That really big one with the crack in it. And I said, oh, scientists recreated the sound, and I never shared it, so I'm a bit of a tease, huh? What does a 200-ton bell sound like? So it's an academic question, obviously, because it can't be rung in its current condition. So it captured the imagination of a team of researchers at UC Berkeley and Stanford, and they've come up with a computer simulation that they're going to blast from Berkeley's Sather Tower today. And they've put together what it sounds like, and I'm going to share that with you now, finally. So this is the Tartaria bell. Interesting, right? Very cool. I like that a bunch of scientists were sitting around and they were like, hey, what did this thing sound like? I can dig that. This is just something for you to look at. We're not going to go through it today. It's I think when I was looking at Romania, I was getting inspired. Sometimes when I look at different places, I'll listen to music from those places. So I'll look at what the architecture looks like, what the music sounds like, to sort of get a deeper feel of what I'm talking about. So I'm not just, just rambling about something I know nothing about. I don't know a lot, but at least I know a little. So these are just beautiful places in Romania that you can look at. It's eye candy, pretty much. So now we're going to move into something interesting. We're going to come back to Tartaria for a little bit. I like to come back to things because I think you can always go deeper with something, right? You can come back to the same spot, but hopefully it's higher up on the spiral. So this is, as you know, Edgar Allan Poe. And Edgar Allan Poe wrote a long poem, like an epic poem called Timurrr. And there was a copy found recently that sold for $660,000. Which, in case you didn't know, is like a lot of money. So there's only 12 copies that exist, apparently. There was one that was found in a barn, and that's why there's this article. And it's very interesting. Now, why is it interesting? You might say, well, what's that about? Who cares? Well, if you remember from 2 episodes ago, when we were talking about Tartaria, this is basically sort of recognized as kind of like the king of Tartaria in his time. Now, you've got to hear some stuff about this guy because he's really interesting. During the summer of 1941, Joseph Stalin ordered the opening of the mysterious tomb in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. The superstitious locals warned the dictator of the Soviet Union about the curse. The archaeologists opened the tomb on the 20th of June, 1941. The sarcophagus had the following curse written on the top: "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble." 2 days later, on the 22nd of June, 1941, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. Stalin believed the curse, and they returned the body to the tomb. And this really happened. This is not like fiction. 2 days later, on the 22nd of June, 1941, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. Oh, I already said that, and he returned the tomb. I'm repeating myself. So he was a thief who became a conqueror. He was not really necessarily born into a position of royalty. He was born in 1336 in Transoxiana, which is modern-day Uzbekistan. His actual name was Timurrr, which means iron in the Shagatai language. Contrary to popular belief, he was not a Mongol. He was a Muslim Turk. He became the most powerful ruler of the 14th century. In his youth, he sustained an injury in battle which made him disabled. He limped with the right leg and was without two fingers on his right hand. His enemies called him Timurrr the Lame, and Europeans misspelled his nickname as the Tamerlane. So being disabled, you'd think that would like not be a hindrance, but not this guy. He was just crazy. When he was a teenager, he led a band of thieves. They were stealing sheep and robbing local merchants and travelers. But through opportunism, military skill, and trickery, he got control over the Chagatai Khanate by 1370. So the new capital, this new empire that he created, was called Samarkand. We've looked at some pictures from there. We'll come back to that in a second. And the city became one of the wealthiest capitals of the 14th century. So he was known as like the Lord of War. In 1395, the Ottomans pissed him off like really bad. And so there was a like shit talking going on both sides. And then finally there became a battle. And so there were the Ottomans, and then there were the Tartars, and there was Tamerlane. And they were getting ready to fight, and the Tartars switched sides and went over to Tamerlane and fought for him. And he also did stuff like he would, wherever the soldiers were camped, he would send out his engineers and make it so that there was no water. Like if there was water flowing through, he would like block it off way up, into their territory. Just an interesting guy. Pretty, lots more stuff that you could read here. But he killed a lot of people. And he actually launched severed heads at ships. This guy was hardcore. So that's Tamerlane. And this is his summer palace from the Library of Congress. And this is the front of his summer palace. Now, if this is considered part of Tartary, this type of architecture does not look like what we're talking about when we talk about the Tartarian, I don't want to call it a myth, the Tartarian, I don't know, there's a word there. Help me out. The belief that Tartary was a hidden, kingdom that, was really big, and then the elites came in, and then it was like hushed over, and then it doesn't exist anymore. I'm totally messing this up, but there's a thing I'll come back to, which is right here. Tartaria, or Tartary, sometimes called the Great Tartary, or Tartaria Magna in Latin, was the name given by the Europeans from the Middle Age to the 20th century to Central and Northern Asia. The extension was from the Caspian Sea and the Ural Mountains to the Pacific Ocean. So here is a map showing where it was. That's the Caspian Sea. We have China, there's Mongolia, these are the stands, that's India. And it comprised a vast region that the people that lived there recognized it as different parts, but the Europeans just kind of called it one big part. So as knowledge of this region increased further, Europeans started to subdivide Tartary into different sections. So basically Siberia, Crimea, Manchuria, and Central Asia. Those four parts were all considered part of the larger of Tartary. Some people refer to it as an empire, but it wasn't really an empire. However, the Mongol Empire did occupy most of this region in the 13th century. It was then divided, and then it declined. The empire, and it's no longer called that, and it's called by its specific, the specific area. Now, this is Kazan. Kazan is sort of recognized as the capital of Tartaristan. Actually, it is the capital of Tartaristan. This is the church that they built, and look how crazy this thing is. And I have a picture of it, or I did have a picture of it. Oh no, where did it go? I have to go back and find it. Here it is. This is This is the church that they built in Kazan, which is a region. I'll show you on the map where it is. So this is the list of rural localities in Tartaristan. This is where Kazan was located. And this that I'm showing you is the church that was built in the town. Now, this particular area, which was a pretty large, sprawling area, only had a population of 140,000 people. I look at this church and I can't help but wonder. It's in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around it, and it's just like super insanely over the top. I don't know. Maybe there's not even a story there. Maybe they were just like really proud. They were like, we're going to make the best church ever. You watch. I don't know. So Kazan is has been kept the same. It's recognized even now as sort of a separate area within Russia. It's the capital of Tatarstan. And it has a lot of archaeology that's now being recognized and acknowledged, and funds are being raised so that people can, the scientists, archaeologists, they can excavate these areas and find this ancient history that undoubtedly exists, that I think will actually help put this this notion of Tartaria either to bed, or it will it'll say yeah it was a real thing. Just want to end with something to think about. We'll come back to this, and that is that the Tartarians are considered by this guy. It's proposed as the missing tribe of Israel. You know how there's like the lost tribe of Israel, or well, the Tartarians are the lost tribe. And that's what's posited in this book, which you can, looks like you can download it. Probably costs money, though. Okay, we're going to look at some pictures. This is the Walpi Pueblo. This is in Arizona. This picture was taken in 1906. And if you look, you see the ladies have these little things kind of on their head. Those are called squash blossoms. And they indicate that the women are unmarried and available for marriage. And they're currently watching something take place over the wall, and that would be over this wall. So they were in a pueblo like this. They were somewhere up here, and they were looking down into the courtyard at something that is taking place. It is one of the oldest continuously inhabited villages in the United States, continuously inhabited for more than 1,100 years, since around 900 AD. It is an example of traditional Hopi stone architecture used for their historic pueblos built at defensive locations on the mesa tops. And this area has been well documented by Ansel Adams. Lots of other people have taken pictures. Here's an example of a Hopi woman with the squash blossoms and some of her pottery. Now I'm going to show you one of my favorite artists, Yaroslav Gazardovich. Sorry, Yaroslav, I messed up your last name, I'm sure. I love what he does. He's just so prolific. Any day now. There we go. So he does a lot of fantasy paintings. He does, if we go back to the album, there's all kinds of different sort of categories. But I like his style. You know, it feels deep to me. And I feel like it ties into Tartaria somehow. You know what I mean? If you look at his stuff, you'll see what I mean. Now this picture, this is Gerrit van Honthorst. I put it as the thumbnail to the previous video, which it did not belong to. But I left it because it's such a great painting. Look at this guy. He's like, hey. So Gerrit van Honthorst was a painter who painted both very serious paintings and paintings that were a lot like this. Like this is just like basically a meme waiting to happen. So he painted things as delicate as, not that, not that, no, as this, as I mess it up again. Where'd it go? There we go. So he did this, and as you can see, it's delicate, it's beautiful. It's not a caricature. It captures, you know, the emotion of, you know, the adoration of the shepherds. But then we look at this other stuff he did, and we've got, I'm not even going to go to that one. That one's slightly not, a little more than PG-13. We've also got this guy. He's like, hey. We've got this guy, hey. I dig this guy. He's cool. So he lived in like 1599 to 16 something. Okay, we're heading into headlines before we get to alien mining. Something strange is happening on the sun, and we've never seen it before. This past week, a part of the sun's surface broke off and started circling the sun's north pole, almost as if it were a giant polar vortex, and scientists don't know why. So the inside of the Earth has stopped spinning, and a part of the sun has broken off. And neither of these things have really happened before. Well, that we know of course. So this is an article that that talks about this a little bit more. I think this shows the polar vortex, the little thingy. There it is, little thingy coming off. I think that's what they're talking about. I don't know. But the James Webb Telescope was brought us these images. The sun does have solar cycles of 11-year changes. Perhaps there are other changes embedded, like perhaps there's changes every 11 years, but maybe every 20,000 years. Like, that's the stuff we're still trying to figure out. And sometimes the sun does stuff that we don't understand, and it's crazy to think about that. That's our life, right there, and it's doing stuff we don't understand. It's kind of wild to think about. So now we're going to open all this up. And we are going to move into, these are the gang territories in Chicago. And I share it because it's such a huge area, and it's really a huge part of, it's indicative of what's going on in America right now in a lot of places, with the discontent, the increase in gang activity. And Chicago is the murder capital of the United States. So it looks like my town is going to be on, like, not an Ancient Alien show, but something like that on TV. Because there's a UFO now currently flying over Poughkeepsie, which is interesting. And they're also going to talk about the, I think it's 1988, but there was what they call a UFO flap. And a flap is when there are multiple sightings over a period of time by many different people at many different times of the evening. So like 2 a.m., 10 p.m. And so what exactly was flying over Poughkeepsie? So they're going to talk about that. I think that's interesting. This is the magnificent history of Turkmenistan. This kind of delves back into Tartaria, but I included it because the pictures of this article are amazing. And it just shows how much there is to probably find there and discover and learn about ourselves. So that's really just for you to kind of read. And this particular article, which I'm also going to leave for you to read, is about how there was a city we've recently discovered in these excavations called Merv, M-E-R-V. And the city was completely razed and it never came back. So for reasons unknown, the whole city was knocked down. Everybody left. And it was only recently discovered. Okay. Mining aliens. So we're going to start out with someone, this cybercore person, saying, hey, why don't we look for evidence of mining? Because aliens they would mine asteroids, right? They would mine planets. So we should look for evidence of mining that would then prove that there's a civilization there. I think I've got that right. Interesting thing to think about, though. And it leads into the next article, which is, so I started reading this. The aliens appeared on considerable distance from their native planet and having deficiency in the technological equipment for working out of entrails. That's what it says. Made simply and ingeniously, having created slave miners, not putting essential investments into manufacture, and having converted people to self-maintenance, they ruthlessly exploited their slaves by means of primitive tools of work. And it goes on. I don't think English is this person's first language. I think this is probably a translation. But he's saying that aliens mined this planet long ago, and that there's proof, and that he's going to share this proof. And he presents what he calls evidence, and there's a very long discussion about it, which you can read. Here's some more discussion about evidence that the Earth has been mined by aliens. There's conversation around this that you can read. But the really interesting thing, I think, is, so stolenhistory.net. Stolenhistory.net. I was cruising on stolenhistory.net when COVID was going on. And there's a lot of interesting people there. There's some people that are searching for the truth, right? In a really, kind of pure academic way. There's some people that are just really have taken it maybe way too far in a very wrong direction. But I think, like I've said before, and I'll say again, probably, is that it's important to know, it's important to think about these things, right? To question and to say, why is that like that? So this gentleman who I love now has his own website, and it's stolenhistory.org. So there's stolenhistory.org, which is also known as the KD blog, and then there's stolenhistory.net. Both are a little, if you're just sort of like an average person who doesn't think a lot about conspiracies, it's going to seem really far out there to you. If you're someone who is kind of into conspiracies, kind of all conspiracies, you like to think about them, you like to talk about them, you'll feel right at home, and you'll be able to find the threads that are worth looking into. So KD presents evidence that the Earth was mined. So he talks about natural formations. Are these really natural formations? He talks about, are these pyramids spoil tips? Spoil tips is the remains of what's left over after the mining. They put them in these big piles, and they're called spoil tips. So are these really pyramids, or are they spoil tips? We have some more natural formations. And then he talks about the Grand Canyon, which I'll be coming back to, so it's all connected. So this is a YouTube video. It'll be in the links, and it's Earth is Aliens Quarry, the proof. And it's something for you to watch. The voice is not irritating. It's a quick thing. You might enjoy it. You might not. Now, this translated before, and it's not translating now. That's very strange. Oh, there it goes. An industrialized civilization has existed on Earth for tens of thousands of years. So this person goes in and talks about how there's been a global civilization. So this article actually should have been earlier in my talk with Tartaria and all that. But this is a very interesting read because this guy goes into everything. I mean, everything. We've got Google Maps. We've got old pictures. We've got stones. How do the stones fit together? We've got stuff cut into rocks. We've got the tracks in Malta. We've got people that live in caves. More old pictures. This person really did an incredible job with their research and their pictures, and I would encourage you to read it. It makes for an interesting read. Now, to take this a step further, are aliens mining us? And by aliens mining us, I'm talking about a thing called Loosh Energy. What's Loosh Energy? I'm going to tell you. The concept of loosh, in my opinion, holds major clue to human freedom. What is loosh? It's a kind of energy that animals and humans generate in situations that involve two things: an intense desire plus a negative emotion. In the last article, I equated Loosh with life force, but when Loosh arises in the harvestable form, it is laced with some sort of negativity, fear, sadness, hopelessness. Life energy isn't negative, so really what is Loosh? It seems to me that Loosh is the strong inrush of vital energy caused by a strong desire in the individual experiencing it. It's that adrenaline surge you feel in a fight or flight situation, but it's more than a chemical because it's also generated in a situation like a lonely person pining where no adrenaline is involved. In both elements, there's a common element, a strong emotional desire. Negativity is what seems to make the harvesting possible, but it is not the Loosh. It is sometimes laces Loosh. Okay, then it goes on. But, okay, so humans, this article is saying we produce this stuff. And when we have negative emotions, it gets really strong. So it is the term, to take this a step further, it is the term applied to energy produced by human beings and animals that other entities use to feed from. It is also used to refer to the energy that is produced by suffering that entities feed on. Maybe a play on the French word louche. So, aliens feeding on negative emotions. And this kind of talks about how the people in charge are amping us up so that we're full of negative emotions so that the aliens can have more food, and then in return the aliens help the government or the people in charge or whatever. It gets a little muddy, but it's an interesting thing to think about. And the truth here, the little kernel of truth in all of this, I think, is that there is something to negative emotions and feeding, right? Like if you have a room and it's filled with people and there's one person that's really negative, like, and it's strong enough, it can go to another person and to another person and to another person. So in a sense, it can be sort of contagious. And I think it's important to always kind of be aware of how we're feeling and what kind of energy we're giving off. Not because of the aliens, but because, one, I think it's a good exercise. And because, two, it helps keep you sort of centered and in a place where you can be you and where you can, figure out what you want to do in this world. Figure out what you want to be when you grow up, even if you're 82. I'm going to end this with some pictures of Socotra Island ruins, which is in Yemen. Yemen is the absolute elbow that I talk about, the Middle Eastern elbow. It's on the elbow. And we're going to talk about that next time. We're going to talk about Socotra Island because it's an amazing place.